If you leave the ward, we will discharge you. Second edit, I have taken out the repeated use of junior doctor. As a commenter pointed out, in the NHS, a junior doctor is any doctor that isn't a consultant, even if they have 20 years experience. Her behavior likely had nothing to do with her job title, status, as it isn't relevant to the story. Thanks to the commenter for calling me out on this. Edit, this blew up more than I thought it would. Thanks for all the lovely comments. Dad is awesome. And this experience left me with a healthy skepticism of medical professionals, which was lucky, as when I had my hysterectomy in 2021, I was refused opioids the day after the surgery and had to advocate for myself. Those who don't want to believe the story. That's cool. Have a great day. TL. Dr. Dad wasn't allowed to leave his surgical recovery ward when he had a heart palpitations and ended up calling 999 from his hospital beds. This is a story from over a decade ago which has always stuck with me, and that I was reminded of by another post here. In 2011, my darling daddy had to have surgery to remove one of his kidneys due to a large cyst. 2 days after his surgery, while he was on the ward recovering, he began to feel unwell, but thankfully it was something he was used to that could be resolved easily: heart palpitations. Now Dad has been having heart palpitations since the mid-90s, and while it was scary in the early days, by 2011 it was a really simple routine. Go to A&E and get an injection from the cardiac team at the hospital. Sometimes he would have a normal sinus rhythm, but would be having palpitations nonetheless, identified by the feeling in his body. The doctor on shift took an ECG and promptly informed him that he was not having a heart palpitation. He had a normal sinus rhythm. He tried to explain that he had been having palpitations for 15 years. He knows what a palpitation feels like, and that all she needed to do was call the cardiac team. This was a semi-regular occurrence, about once a year, and the heart nurses all knew him by name and loved him. He's quite a character. The doctor refused to page the cardiac team, repeating that he wasn't having palpitations. For a couple of hours, Dad sat there in panic, getting more and more distressed. It was outside of visiting times, so he was alone. He told the doctor that he would make his own was to the cardiac team, and she told him, "If you leave the ward, we will consider you absconded and we will formally discharge you." Again, this was 2 days after losing a major organ. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. Dad called 999 from his hospital bed. When they asked for his address, he said, "That's an interesting question. Normally it's XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. But right now I'm on Ward X at 4X Hospital." Quote. Shocked, the call handler asked what had happened, and Dad relayed the whole thing to them. The call handler escalated the call to a manager who asked to speak to Dad's doctor and gave her a massive dressing down. Her face grayed as she realized the gravity of what was happening. She immediately arranged for a porter to take him to A&E UK emergency room to be assessed by the cardiac team. And what do you know? He was, in fact, having palpitations and had been for several hours. A quick injection later, his heart was back to normal, and we were all left stunned by the whole thing. I was in my 20s at the time, and Dad was my superhero. And seeing him crying in a hospital bed, looking so scared and small, will never leave me. I will never forget what that doctor did. And I'll never forgive her. She never even apologized to him. Or to us. Dad could probably have taken the hospital, the doctor and the trust to court. But that's just not his bag, and he just let it go like water off a duck's back. 12 years later and he's healthy and happy. But I honestly thought I might lose him because of an arrogant doctor and her stubbornness. Good on your dad. Sometimes medical professionals can be so dismissive. I had atrial fibrillation, and my cardiologist said I should call in every time I had one, so I could report how long it lasted. One time, I got a nurse who said I didn't have to do that. Then she said that some people don't even feel when they were in a fib. Lucky them, I guess. I could definitely feel them. And it wasn't a fun experience. I told my cardiologist about that the next time we talked. He seemed surprised that a cardiac clinic nurse would have that sort of reaction. My roommate, I think you call them flatmates, almost died because of a dismissive doctor. My roommate, Lori, was in a lot of pain in the abdominal area. She asked her GF, Denise, to drive her to the ER. The ER doc did no physical examination and sent her home with a Xeroxed paper talking about abdominal pain in general. A few hours later and Lori is in even more pain. So Denise took her to a different ER. That doctor did some simple palpations with his hand and within 5 minutes ordered emergency surgery to remove her gallbladder that was about to burst. The doctor told her that if she had waited just 2 more hours, she probably would not have survived. This was prob 30 years ago. I've lost touch with her, but last time I saw her she told me that she had hired a lawyer to sue the first doctor. I don't fit into the normal box. So doctors hate me because they have no idea how to deal with me. Throughout my entire pregnancy my main issue was recovery after the little one was born. I was hoping for natural but they pushed for C-section due to a couple of issues. Every appointment I expressed my concern that I've recovered from the last 4 surgeries without pain relief as it doesn't work. We worked out to keep the epidural in 24 hours and set up a ketamine infusion. Day of I figured we were all on the same page. I'd seen the notes in my file, so we go into the operating theater. Not only do they take the epidural out, they decide to not give me the infusion. Instead I spend 6 hours in recovery not bonding with my child because the epidural has worn off and I can feel everything. Finally, after throwing everything at me, they give me the ketamine infusion. By then I was exhausted. For them to only keep me on the infusion 24 hours, so essentially recovered from a C-section without pain relief. Then they wanted to send me home the next day when I couldn't walk the distance to the toilet and wet myself 3 times trying to get there. The poor nurses looking after me were almost in tears. They felt useless, unable to help. I'm still angry and scared. Hospitals are not bastions of competence and efficiency. My mom's pal, aged 80, was sent to room X, building Y of our local hospital to get a chiropody treatment. She was very surprised to be told to take her clothes off. Turns out instead of the feet department, they had given her an appointment at the sexually transmitted diseases clinic. Later that month, she was very surprised to receive a phone call while at home, asking her to come and collect herself from the hospital. Such is the efficiency of the NHS that different and incompatible computers are used by local doctors, the hospitals, the government and local specialist clinics. My husband lost his knee because of an arrogant junior doctor. He was already a below-the-knee amputee. A simple surgery to remove a bone shard cost him his knee. He was fully capable of walking with his prosthetic at the time. Now he is stuck in a wheelchair. He's prone to infections and has trouble getting rid of them. He always needs antibiotics after surgery. The junior surgeon refused them. It was a Friday afternoon. His regular doctor was gone for the weekend, so they made an APPT for the following Monday. We didn't feel the ER would help since there was no infection yet. They almost had to take his whole leg off to get rid of the infection that settled in the bone. They did take the rest of his lower leg and knee off. All the heavy-duty antibiotics he was on for months ruined his kidneys. They can't go back in and make it easier for him to wear a new prosthetic, so he has to use a wheelchair. He's got a broken clavicle that they won't repair, fear of infection, so using a wheelchair is extremely hard on him as well. All because a junior doctor played God and wouldn't listen to the patient. I am by no means blaming your father for anything, but it always makes me mad when people don't try to sue or report someone to a medical board over stuff like this. That doctor needed to be either fired or had a mark put on their license over this to ensure they don't make mistakes like this again. That reminds me. Back in the early 1980s, my baby firstborn, less than 1Y, was having projectile vomiting on a long weekend. No Ubers or Google back in the day, but my wife read somewhere that's what it was. We took him to Children's Hospital and they treated us like hysterical parents. The duty doc eventually came and we explained the symptoms to her and she just said, "We'll see," in that condescending put-down tone. Then she got a little spatula's thing out and asked to see in his mouth. We warned her again and she insisted. As soon as Dr. Fancy Pants Know-It-All put the spatula on his tongue, he unloaded what he had left in his stomach across her extended arm straight into her face. She hadn't even bothered to wear PPE. So yeah, she agreed and called it projectile vomiting, and finally admitted him to hospital where he spent the next few days rehydrating on a drip with medications added. Poor little bub. But the doctor got what she deserved. One time I, M20, had really bad throat pain with general flu symptoms. After a few days of the pain getting really bad, went into the doctor, and GP was unsure of the issue. Things were bad at this point and I actually passed out in the doctor's office. Never fainted before. After having some tests taken, doctor sent me home with some mild painkillers, saying that I must be overreacting since my COVID results were negative. That night my throat had swollen so much I couldn't swallow and was struggling to breath. Again, family is like me and don't tend to think things are serious. But after fighting with my parents, by writing, couldn't speak at this point, to take me the hospital and that I wasn't overreacting. Never been to the ER before, and now glad I haven't. After waiting for a nurse to check on me while I'm wheezing in the corner, she notes that she can't see anything and does a COVID test. Negative. Thinks there's nothing wrong but hands me over to the doctors. Team of young doctors standing around me on a bed, all just kinda staring at me, puzzled that I don't have COVID yet, having these symptoms. Do 2 more COVID tests before saying they don't know. Load me on painkillers and leave me in the bed overnight, feeling better in the morning, and get sent out since I'm apparently not sick. After spending the next few days wheezing away on painkillers in bed, GP finally calls me up. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect this, but you actually have glandular fever. Sending you a script for medication right now." FFS. I swear doctors act like every other disease disappeared during the pandemic. I was going to have elbow surgery a few years back. I'd watched enough House that I knew accidents happen. So I Sharpie tattooed myself "no, no, 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 no" all over the wrong arm. Checked into the hospital, and the nurse swung by. On what? Quote, "Oh boy, that should have been my clue. But it was early and I wasn't completely all there." Huh? Quote, "Why did you write on all over your arm?" Quote, "I didn't. I wrote no all over the wrong arm. Just in case there are any mistakes." Well, that was her cue to take serious personal umbrage and attempt to dress me down for daring to suggest that the entire medical profession could possibly not be completely flawless with its execution. I'd fully woken up in the interim and was in no mood. So let her foam at the mouth and didn't react. 45 minutes she comes back with the surgery orders for me to confirm and sign. "Excuse me, there's a problem." "Really? What?" Quote, "Wrong arm." Bitch didn't even try to apologize. Just grabbed the orders and left. Later on I relayed the story to my surgeon as he was making his mark on the correct arm. And we both had a good chuckle. My friend was a paramedic. Went to the ER and told the triage nurse she was having heart attack. The nurse told her there was no way and sit down and wait her turn. She remembers making it to a seat and then she blacked out. Woke up in CCU surrounded by hospital lawyers and her husband. The nurse was fired. She'd been reprimanded before for a similar incident. They asked her what it would take for her not to sue. She is a pediatric surgeon with no debt and bought a nice house. Women are often misdiagnosed and ignored when they seek medical attention, because we exaggerate or dramatize our pain and symptoms. During the time when if you had anything above sniffles it was thought to be COVID and they wanted to test, I explained to the urgent care doctor that I have asthma and maybe every other year I need antibiotics and asked him to look through my records. He refused to treat me and I was able to get in to see my pulmonary doctor the next day. He takes blood which comes back showing I have pneumonia and gives me antibiotics. I refused to pay the urgent care bill as he wouldn't treat me and walked out of the room. That reminds me of the old joke. What do you call the person that graduates last of the class at med school? Quote, of course. The answer is, doctor. This asshat kid should have been fired. That is gross negligence that could easily to the death of a patient. Kudos to your dad for handling it like a boss. I had a double hip replacement in late 2015. And was skiing in early 2016. My orthopedic surgeon cleared me when I had a bad fall and felt a crunch when I landed. Was initially worried I had broken a hip, but could move, albeit slowly. Got off the mountain and went to the ER. Had trouble walking. Lots of pain. Had x-rays done. Doc said, all okay. Just a strain. Nurse asked doctor if he was sure, and was denigrated for questioning his judgment. I could barely move, but went home. Saw my orthopedic surgeon after 2 days of severe pain. And he said my x-rays looked cloudy and he wanted another set done. Was diagnosed with a pelvis fractured in 2 places. The nurse was spot on. The doctor was a pompous asshole. Dentists love to roll their eyes and underdose the Novocaine. Then act annoyed when they have to stop to give me more. I'm like I told you. It takes a lot and wears off fast. I have the red hair gene. Good on your dad. Side note. Were this in the States, they would have taken him out to an ambulance, driven him around the parking lot and dropped him off at emergency for about $6,000. I've known multiple people who almost died of appendicitis because doctors didn't take them seriously. I am not a doctor, though my dad is retired. One thing I learned from him is that dumb doctors overly on fancy technology to tell them what's going on with a patient instead of looking at the patient's face and fingernails, taking a history and otherwise using the senses the gods gave them. It's scary but a fact. Doctors bury their mistakes. My uncle went to the ER many years ago because he was having a severe allergic reaction to an OTC medication he had taken before. He had his sister-in-law who was a surgical nurse with him at the time cause they were visiting family in the said hospital. The newly minted doctor told him he wasn't having an allergic reaction and it was a lung issue and had to wait for the specialist. Within 20 minutes he went into anaphylaxis shock and still the doctor insisted it was a lung issue. My uncle never fully regained consciousness and was in a coma for 6 years thanks to the arrogant doctor until he died. We sued the hospital and doctor who paid for his home care and everything for the next 6 years. I am so happy that your dad was able to advocate for himself. Nurse in the hospital told my sister, who is extremely allergic to egg, that she is not allergic to egg and can have the vaccine perfectly fine. It contains egg. Another doctor we asked looked shocked when we mentioned what the nurse said, and clarified that my sister is still allergic to egg and definitely can't have the vaccine or she'll have a severe reaction.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.